Hello, my achievers. How are all of you? I'm so happy to be back here with you today. So, welcome to Grade 10's Resources and Development Part 3. Yes, this is the third session of this particular chapter. I hope that all of you have been tuning in and watching the sessions that we've done so far. Right? So, what did we do in the first session of this chapter? Well, in the first session, we basically discussed resources. We spoke about what you can define as a resource, and we spoke about the classification of resources. And then we went ahead and we spoke about how resources are getting depleted and how we need to conserve our resources. Right? Then, last week in session number 2, we went ahead and we spoke about land resources, and we spoke about land usage patterns and basically the different categories and how the purposes or uses have changed over the decades, right? We spoke about the 1960s to the 2000s. And then we went further and we understood a little bit more about land degradation and conservation of resources. Right? So if you see the pattern that we've been following, we've been talking about resources, how they get depleted and how to conserve them. Even in terms of land, what we did last time, we spoke about land as a resource, how it is getting degraded and how we need to conserve land. Right? So on that note, today what are we going to be doing? We are going to be doing soil as a resource, and then we're going to be talking about soil erosion and conservation of soil, right? So just in case you haven't attended the previous sessions, it would be a really good idea for you to go and check those sessions out. They will still definitely be available for you on the 9th 10th channel. Go check it out because it'll help you to form a link with what we are going to do here today. Right? And if you've already checked it out, then well, then what are we waiting for? Let's get started. So let's talk about our first subtopic for today, which is ta-da! Soil as a resource. I love the drama, Okay, so soil as a resource. Let us understand what soil is in the first place. So, any thoughts about what soil is? Well, soil we know is one of the most important natural resources, right? I mean, this is where we, have our natural vegetation. Soil we know has different types of living organisms that are on earth basically. It has a lot of life in it. In fact, I would say that we are able to live only because we have soil, right? It takes care of so many of our needs, right? Now, is soil merely the upper crust of the land as we see it, or is there something more to it? Well, actually, if we were to actually zoom into this upper crust of land as we say, or upper crust of earth as we say, on top we have the soil, right? But on zooming in, you will find that soil is actually made up of many layers, right? So the soil basically has 4 layers. The first layer is what we call topsoil. Now, this is the layer that has all your organic material in it. It has humus, and this is the layer that actually supports life, helps our crops grow really, really well, right? Then, under this first layer, which is the topsoil, we have the next layer, which I will put for you in a different color. We have the subsoil. Now, the subsoil is basically made up of sand, silt, and clay, right? Then, the third layer, as we know it, is the weathered rock material. I'm just writing weathered rock over here, so you know this is the weathered rock material. And then the fifth layer is basically, as we know it, the parent rock. Now, parent rock is actually what weathers down to give us the soil or disintegrates to give us the soil. We will be talking about this in just a little bit so that you understand. So basically, these are the 4 layers of soil, right? Now, do you know that soil as a resource is so precious, and it actually takes millions and millions of years to get just even a centimeter of soil. Did you know that? So the question is, how exactly is this soil formed? Right? Now, I want to tell you that there are 5 factors that affect soil formation. I'm going to put these down for you over here. The first one is the parent rock. I told you earlier that this is what sort of disintegrates or breaks down to give us our soil. Then, the second factor that we are going to be discussing today is climate, which also really affects soil formation. Then the third one is relief or altitude or slope, right? So it's all the same thing. Relief features, like how is the land, what is the topography of the land, is it sloping? Basically, I will be covering this in just a little bit so that you understand this. So relief. And then the fourth factor is vegetation and other life forms. Okay, vegetation, let me put this down to you properly, vegetation, right? Again, I will be discussing this. You will understand everything by the end of the session or just in a little bit, okay? Then the fifth one is time. Now, all these factors are very, very important in terms of soil formation. So let us go ahead and let us understand each of these and how they contribute to soil formation, right? Now, the first factor that we are going to discuss today is parent rock or bedrock. This is what, like I said before a couple of times, our soil is actually formed from this bedrock. Right? It's the last layer of soil that I spoke to you about, right? So I spoke to you, I said this is the layer that we're going to be talking about. Now, basically rock. We get soil out of rock. How do we get soil out of rock? That is exactly what I'm going to be explaining right now. So let us assume that you have this parent rock, as you can see right here in the image, right? Now, just imagine that this rock is standing over there, and sometimes you have really, really strong sun, right? Now, what happens when you have sun that is beating down high temperatures? Well, we know that when there are high temperatures, things start to expand, right? And then when the temperature cools down, what happens? The same thing starts to contract. Right? So basically, because of temperature changes, this parent rock expands and contracts and expands and contracts, and as a result, we find that there are cracks that start appearing in this rock, okay? And cracks start forming. Then you have rainwater which starts falling into the cracks. As the water starts seeping, the cracks start becoming a little bit larger. You have a vegetation or plants that start growing in between these cracks. The roots of the plants make this crack larger. So as these cracks start becoming larger and larger, what starts happening? This parent rock starts to break down, or it basically starts the process of weathering, which is the disintegration of this parent rock. And this weathering process is very, very important for soil formation, in the sense that that is what actually causes the soil formation. So the first factor, as we spoke about, is parent rock, right? That is where we get our soil from because of the weathering. The next factor that we are going to be talking about is climate. Now, logically, climate is very, very important. We obviously know this. I've told you how temperature changes cause the rock to expand and contract and basically lead to weathering, right? So obviously the climate of a place will determine temperature changes, and therefore will be very, very important in terms of weathering of the rock material, which then goes ahead and makes the soil for us. So climate is factor number 2. See, it's all very logical. If we were to just apply our minds and understand how it happens, we will be able to understand the factors quite well, right? So this is factor number 2. Then factor number 3 that affects soil formation is relief or slope, which means basically we're talking about mountain slopes as we see them. Right? How does this affect soil formation? Well, again, very logically, if we were to think about it, okay, we know that there is parent rock. Now, as this parent rock starts disintegrating, this weathered material basically starts disintegrating and falling down. So, as a result, what will happen? You will have soil formation that is happening here because of disintegration, and you have obviously soil formation that is happening at the bottom because the soil is going and it is falling down. Now, logically, again, talking about soil formation on altitudes or slope, as it is falling down here, you will have a thinner deposit of soil because it's not really staying on the slope, it's falling down, right? And at the bottom of the altitude or the slope, we basically will have a thicker deposit of soil, and this is how altitude or slope affects soil formation. So this was factor number 3. Then we move ahead and we talk about factor number 4, which is vegetation and other forms of life. Now, we know that wherever you have soil, you're going to have vegetation, right? So plants are going to grow, you're going to have living organisms that are living in that soil. Now, what is happening to this is that this vegetation, these living organisms, they live over here. And then what happens, because of the circle of life, they start dying over here also. As they die, they basically start decomposing and then adding to the organic matter of that soil. So this cycle of living organisms living and dying basically also contributes to the fertility or the humus content of the soil. So this also has a lot to do with soil formation. And then factor number 5 is time. Again, it is so logical. More the amount of time, more the amount of weathering. And so obviously, time is also a very important factor, right? So we've covered this in detail. If you get a question to ask you, what are the factors that affect soil formation, you go ahead and you talk about these 5 factors. Depending on the length of the question, you will give a little bit more detail, right? So if it's just, for example, a short type question, then you just list the factors. But if it is a longer type question, then you can give detail as to how each of these factors contributes to soil formation, right? So with that, we are actually done with our first subtopic. We have discussed in detail soil. What is soil? What are the layers that make up soil? Soil as a resource. And we have gone ahead and we have understood how soil is formed. Well, now this was about our resource. Now we are going to be talking about the soil erosion, which is basically the loss of the top layer of soil. And we are going to be talking about soil conservation, right? Okay, so without any further ado, let us go ahead and let us understand what exactly is soil erosion. Well, soil erosion is the denudation of the soil cover and the subsequent washing down. So again, very simply, we are basically talking about the washing away or the removal or the loss of the first layer of soil, which is basically the topsoil, right? And this topsoil is so very important to us because that's the one that actually helps us to live, right? So it is the washing away or the removal of the top layer of soil, right? Now, in nature, you should know that there is always a beautiful balance. You know, nature always has this beautiful way of things getting over and then replenishing themselves, right? So, well, not over, but in terms of getting denudation. What am I saying? Denudation of soil and then soil formation. So what I'm trying to tell you is that nature has this beautiful balance, and both these processes happen in nature, which is soil formation as well as soil erosion. It is natural for this to happen. But all is well until these two are in perfect balance with each other, soil erosion and soil formation. The problem occurs when the rate of soil erosion is greater than the rate of soil formation, right? Now I told you that soil formation takes millions of years. If the erosion happens at a much faster level, which means that we are left without the resource, right? That resource is getting depleted. So this is the balance that we have to take care of, right? So let us understand a little bit of how exactly soil erosion happens. So soil erosion again happens because of many factors, some which we can help, some which we cannot help, right? So the ones that we cannot really help are the natural forces. So we're talking about running water, we're talking about wind, we're talking about moving glaciers. All these are natural factors. They don't have much human involvement in the sense that they are all part of nature, and naturally when these factors are there, the soil is going to get eroded, right? But the thing that we can help are the human factors, which means that there are certain human activities, as always, that result in a loss of some of our resources, and it's the same with soil also. So in terms of human activities, there are many things that we do that lead to soil erosion, like for example construction, mining, deforestation. All of these lead to the to soil erosion, which obviously we know is not a very good thing if it's going to happen so fast, right? So now let's talk about soil erosion in terms of two natural factors first, which is running water and wind erosion. Right now, in terms of running water, there are two kinds of erosions broadly that happen because of running water, and these are sheet erosion and gully erosion. You may get a short question to ask you. Sheet erosion is a result of what? What is it a result of? As in, is it a result of running water? Is it a result of wind? What is happening to my language? Sorry, I'm like trying to give you all the points really, really fast, and that's why I'm stumbling. Okay, so what are these two? Let us understand a little bit more in detail. Let's understand sheet erosion. Now, try and visualize this, okay? Sheet erosion is basically the removal of the soil layer by layer in sheets. So you see the image over here, it's getting removed in sheets, right? So one layer goes, then again you have running water that comes in and another layer goes. So sheet by sheet it's being removed, and this is basically very simply what sheet erosion is sheet erosion is caused because of running water. Right? So the water comes, it takes away one layer of soil. Then the water comes again, then it removes the second layer, and this way we are losing our soil, right? So it's basically removing thin layers of soil one after the other, right? Name gives it away. Next, let's go ahead and understand gully erosion. Now, gully erosion is when there is fast moving running water which basically cuts into the soil and forms deep channels, or what we call ravines. Right? So it cuts through this, takes away a large part of the soil with it in terms of a gully. As you can see over here, there are these channels that are being formed, and as a result leaves land on top which we cannot really use, and this resultant land that is left after gully erosion is known as bad land, and it is not fit for cultivation. Right? So this is exactly what sheet erosion and gully erosion means. If you think about it logically, sheet erosion gets removed in sheets, gully erosion forms gullies or channels or ravines, right? Okay. Now, let us go ahead and let's talk about soil erosion in terms of wind. So what happens in terms of wind? Well, we know that in arid areas you have fast moving winds that move and then basically takes a large, lots and lots of soil with it, and basically that's how soil erosion happens. Right? So when wind carries the soil particles along with it, it leaves behind eroded land which we can't really do much with. Right? Then we have, let me underline this properly for you. Then we have erosion due to incorrect methods of farming. Now this is a human factor that we are going to be talking about. We know that farming is very important. Soil is very important. We are practicing agriculture on that land. Now, when we are practicing agriculture, a very important part of the agricultural process is plowing. We know it basically means loosening up the soil. Now, imagine that you have a slope, as you can see over here. Now, just imagine what if we're going to do plowing in an up and down fashion like this, okay, up and down plowing, what is going to happen? The soil is going to become loose. And then what starts happening? You have water that basically finds it much easier to go down these slopes with the soil being looser. And as a result, when you have running water, automatically you have soil that is getting removed, right? So this is actually an incorrect method of farming. We should not be plowing in an up and down fashion. How should we be plowing? Well, we should be plowing in an across the slope fashion. So this is your slope over here. So what are you doing? You are plowing in this direction basically. You see this? You're plowing horizontally, so that what happens over here is you're breaking the flow of water. Water cannot run down as fast. It basically keeps getting broken, and as a result over here there's less water running, and naturally because of this there is less soil erosion. Right? Now this is again so easy. If we just think and we apply how things are done, we will find it very easy to understand the concepts. Right? Now let's move a little bit ahead. We know that soil erosion is a reality, and unfortunately soil erosion is happening at a much faster pace than we would like, which means that it's happening much faster than soil formation, and this is a problem. So we have the need for soil conservation. How do we conserve the soil? Well, we're going to be talking about different types of soil conservation methods in different terrains, right? Because each type of terrain is different, and how we conserve the soil in those areas is very different, right? So we're going to be talking about three kinds of terrains, which is basically we're going to be talking about methods to prevent soil erosion on hilly slopes. We're going to be talking about methods of soil conservation on plains, and we're going to be talking about how to conserve the soil or how to prevent soil erosion in dry and arid areas, right? Okay, let's go ahead and talk about hilly slopes. Now, in terms of hilly slopes, there are two types of soil conservation methods that we can use, or basically two methods to avoid soil erosion, and this is the constructing or the building of contour barriers, and then the second one is terrace farming. Now, what are these two respectively? Let us understand. Contour barriers is basically when you have a slope, what we are basically doing is creating contour barriers made out of, let me put this for you in a maybe you'll be able to see this in white. One second. Can you see this over here? We're building these kind of contour barriers which are made out of rock or stone and things like that, and we're building them at places which have the same altitude on that particular slope. So what is happening again? We are creating barriers. So running water cannot really flow down much faster, right? Then around the contour barrier, again, I'm going to highlight this for you. We built these kind of, trenches that you can see over here, and these are generally filled with grass and things like that, so that when the water comes and it's coming down, there is water that is collecting over there, and again it doesn't really go down to the next level, right? So what are we doing over here? This is nothing but a way of breaking the flow of water. If you break the flow of water, as always, you will have less soil erosion. So this is one method of soil conservation on relief for slopes. Then the next method of soil conservation or method of preventing soil erosion on slopes is terrace farming. Now, as you can see in the picture, what we do in terrace farming is that farming is done on broad step-like terraces. You see over here, this is the terraces over here. So what again happens is that the water is not really going down directly. The flow of the water is again broken, right? Again, so what are we doing over here? We're basically slowing down the pace of the running water. Right? And then another advantage of this is that these broad steps that you can get over here, you can actually practice agriculture. Right? And this is why it is called terrace farming. So your farming also happens, and your trying to stop of soil erosion also happens. So basically we're conserving our soil with terrace farming if it is practiced on hilly slopes. Right? Okay, then let's go ahead and talk about soil conservation in plains. Now, a very important way of soil conservation in terms of plains is the process of mulching. Okay, now what is mulching really? Mulching is basically creating a barrier between the soil and the atmosphere. So what are we going to do? Atmosphere or the environment. So what are we doing over here? We're basically creating layers of straw or hay, which we cover the soil with. Now, how does this help? Number one, by covering the soil or the vegetation around it with hay or straw. What are we doing? We're not allowing the water vapor to escape into the atmosphere, and as a result, we are reducing. We're basically increasing fertility of the soil. The soil is remaining moist, and we can have more plants that grow over there. But in terms of soil erosion, a very important fact over here is that if you're creating a barrier over there, it definitely is going to slow down the process of either wind or water taking it away, right? So you're creating a barrier on top of the soil, and this is what mulching is. It's basically covering that soil covering the soil with hay or straw so that you're protecting that soil. Right? So mulching is very important. Again, they may ask you to describe what mulching is. It could be a short type of question. So you should know what it is, and you should know that mulching is a process of soil conservation that is normally done on the plains. Right? Okay, let's move on to our next method of soil erosion on the plains, which is basically building rock dams. Now, what is building rock dams? Let me show you. If you see the picture again, you will understand it. On the plains, sometimes if you have channels of running water, what do we do in these channels of running water? We need to slow down again. We need to slow down the pace of the water flowing. So what do? We build rock dams, which means that we put rocks, sandbags, really heavy sort of material basically, which are piled along that drainage so that it slows down the water, right? And we know again, when you stop the flow of the water or slow down the flow of the water, less soil erosion. Right? Okay. It's basically about stopping the natural factors as much as we can, whether it is the wind or the water. These methods are basically slowing down that factor as much as possible, right? In terms of the natural factors. Then another method of soil conservation on plains is strip cropping. Now, what is strip cropping? Again, the picture will tell you. You're basically growing strips of grass around your cultivated area. So what happens over here is you have grass growing, and then what happens is that you have the wind that comes, but the wind is getting blocked by this grass over here, so it cannot take away as much soil as it can. So again, in this case also, you're stopping the flow or trying to block the flow of the wind as much as possible, so we reduce the chances of soil erosion, right? This is what strip cropping is. Then we move on to the last kind of terrain, which is soil conservation in dry regions. Now, dry regions or arid regions, we're talking about places like deserts, for example. Now, over there, we know that there is not much vegetation. The wind is moving at a really fast speed. There's nothing to hold that soil back. So, what can we do in dry or desert areas, arid areas? Basically, we basically try and plant trees to form a shelter belt. Again, as you see over here, it is blocking the flow of the wind, and as a result taking away less soil. And again, when you have trees, the roots of the soil are basically holding on to that soil, so it's not really getting blown away. Right? And these were the methods of soil conservation. So with this, we finished both our subtopics, which is soil as a resource, and we discussed soil erosion, what it is, what causes soil erosion, and we have gone ahead and spoken about soil conservation in terms of 3 types of terrain, which is what? Slopes, plains, and arid areas. And with this, we have actually finished our session of resources and development part 3. We have actually now, with these 3 sessions, we have finished the entire chapter. Now, we've broken it up into 3 sessions to give you shorter sessions, because we know that the social science chapters are quite long, so we are trying to give it to you in bits and pieces so you can absorb that level of information and then study bits of it. But when you are revising, or if you want a thorough understanding, then it would be a good idea to watch all these 3 sessions, so you will understand the progression of what is happening from the beginning of the chapter to what is happening at the end of the chapter. And like this, we are going to be covering a much larger amount of syllabus also. You you know that BYJU'S 9 to 10 always has you covered. We are going to be covering all the topics. So during the live sessions, when you all ask me, ma'am, can you cover this? Ma'am, can you cover that? We will cover everything for you. You know we are here with you. Just all that you need to do is subscribe to the channel and definitely like and share too. Okay, so I'm going to see you very, very soon in our next session.